47 cents. That was the official price for a pound of steak in wartime Washington. But to get it, you didn't just need $1. You needed a kidney, a bribe, or a good friend at the slaughterhouse. Did you think the toughest war was being fought somewhere in Europe or the Pacific? You were wrong. It was being fought right here in the kitchens of America. My name is Robert. I know what dirty money is. Today, we will dive into a world that most of you only imagine in black and white films, the black markets of the United States during World War II, when the land of the free suddenly became a land of prohibitions. We were building tanks to fight for democracy, but at the same time, our neighbors were selling sugar coupons right out the back door. It was the most prosperous war for some, and a real hell for others. Are you 45 yet? Do you remember what it was like to fight for every piece? No, we do not know this. And it is time to understand what actually lies behind these beautiful stories about heroic America. This is a story of how greed defeated the law, and scarcity made millionaires of those we consider saints. If you are tired of lying, polished stories, hit the subscribe button right now. What follows will be dirty, simple, and to the point. December 7th, 1941. Bam. You wake up in one country and go to sleep in a completely different one. You are an American. You are proud to live in the richest country in the world, where everyone has their own car in their garage. And then, suddenly, they tell you, that's it. The free till is closed. You think war is when you send young guys overseas to shoot at Nazis. You are right, but only halfway. A real total war is when you completely restructure the economy for one single goal, victory. And our nation became the arsenal of democracy. Sounds loud, damn it, but it was the truth. Tough as steel. What did that mean for guys like us, 50-year-olds, who sit at home and want to buy something ordinary? It meant that Henry Ford was no longer making cars for you so you could drive your wife to Memphis. He, along with Chrysler and GM, was making tanks, guns, and fighter jets. Take the example of Ford's Willow Run plant in Michigan. It was an industrial miracle, a huge, giant facility designed for mass production. They were not making their famous Fords there. They were stamping out B-24 Liberator bombers, one plane an hour, 7 days a week. Think about this. To supply the Army with just 1 gallon of gasoline, you needed rubber for military truck tires, steel for their bodies, sugar for fermenting the alcohol used in gunpowder, and oil for fuel. Everything you loved, from a new razor to a bag of sugar for coffee, suddenly became strategic raw materials. All of it had to go to the guys fighting on the front lines. The government issued the Price Control and Rationing Order, Price Control and Rationing. This was not just an economic document, it was a knife that cut our usual way of life in two. In one moment, the most prosperous nation found itself in a world of scarcity, almost like during the Great Depression. Only the reason was different, too much production, but all for the war. We became a nation that collected scrap metal, planted victory gardens in backyards, and learned to save every drop. Do you feel the irony? The biggest industrial monster in the world suddenly couldn't even produce enough waste paper to print those damn coupons. And this is where our story begins. War is cruel mathematics, and where there is scarcity, there are always geniuses who will find a way to circumvent it. They are not fools. They are not thinking about patriotism. They are thinking about the demand that has exploded the market, and about easy money. It was a psychological blow. You work, you earn money, but you cannot even buy a simple piece of meat because you do not have the right, small, colored paper coupon. It was this coupon, created for honesty and equality, that became a perfect target for those who knew no honor. Forget about these guys being street villains. They were often just your neighbors, your butcher, your mechanic. In the next one, I will tell you exactly how this piece of paper, which was supposed to save us from hunger, created the largest illegal empire in U.S. history. and why 200 products were enough for the country to plunge into shadow. You were told that you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, weren't you? That all rests on one foundation: the ability to buy what you need with your honestly earned money. But when the government declares that your money is worthless without another, small, unsubstantiated piece of paper, that breaks the very backbone of your American prosperity. World War II was, in essence, the largest redistribution of resources in American history. Everything you saw on store shelves before Pearl Harbor was now going to the front. Metal, rubber, nylon, sugar, and scarcity, brothers, became the new norm of life. People could not accept this. After the Depression, we finally began to live, to buy, to build. And then they tell us that from now on we have to do without elementary things. In 44 months of rationing, we went from one sugar coupon to a total control system over 200 different commodities. 200 items. Just think about it. How did it work? At first, coupons were introduced for those products that were needed for soldiers, such as sugar. Without it, you cannot make alcohol for gunpowder. And then it started. Gasoline, tires, butter, meat, cheese, coffee, leather, canned vegetables, washing machines, and even typewriters. Yes, goddamn typewriters. The government needed to print millions of documents for the war machine, and metal was needed for tanks. Therefore, new machines were no longer produced for offices. You want to buy an old one? Welcome to the black market. Pay 10 times more. Families were issued entire books of coupons, not just one small book, but several. Red, blue, green, each color for its own type of goods. This was a kind of state control over your digestive system, and immediately paradoxes began. A quote from the temporary administrator of the Office of Price Administration, Leon Henderson, sounded like a mockery of us. If you have dollars and no coupons, you can't buy the commodity. If you have coupons and no dollars, you can't buy the commodity. You must have both. That's the pain of it all. You have the money, but you can't legally buy anything with it. Your economic freedom suddenly evaporated. This gave rise to ridiculous, but at the same time, eerie situations. Want to take your car on vacation? Sorry, gasoline is strictly rationed for urgent needs, like driving to work. The government even ran campaigns. Is this trip really necessary? Is this trip really necessary? Thus, in a country built on the ideal of roads and automobile freedom, state censorship over your personal plans appeared for the first time. Meat was the most difficult. It was the last to be rationed. The allowance was only 2.5 pounds, less than 1.5 kilograms per person per week. Do you think that's little? Well, it had to include everything, from beef to chicken wings to butter and cheese. Try to feed your 45-year-old man on that allowance. This situation became a gold mine for those who had the opportunity to get raw materials and sell them circumventing legal retail. It wasn't the mafia that came to scarcity. Scarcity came to people who wanted to eat meat and created the mafia where it hadn't been before. But you know what's most interesting? The government tried, but it was always behind street smarts. They could not calculate all the combinations. How did people manage to get tons of meat without coupons? I will tell you that next. Do you remember those perfect images? A polite official printing perfect forms so that everything is fine. Forget it. The Office of Price Administration, or OPA for short, was not a beautiful bureaucratic invention. It was a monster that was born out of fear of one thing: inflation. Inflation is a silent killer. In World War I, prices skyrocketed like rockets. The government told itself, no more mistakes like that. During World War II, money was flowing like a river because factories were working non-stop. People had jobs and wages. But there were fewer and fewer goods on the market that could be bought because they were going to the front. a classic stupid imbalance of supply and demand. If demand is high and there is no supply, what will happen? Prices take off. And to prevent this, Roosevelt created the OPA. The OPA was conceived as a shield. It was a body designed to keep prices in place so that your dollar would not turn into a piece of paper and workers would not demand a pay raise every week. But its tool was the coupon, and that is what turned paradise into hell. Coupons. 16 different books, thousands of small perforated squares, each with an exact weight, price, and expiration date. It was a system of totalitarian control in a free country. These books were issued to you in schools through special commissions. You had to register, provide data about your family, and prove that you deserved your ration. It sounds humiliating. You, a citizen, are forced to stand in line and prove that you need to eat. Now imagine the entire bureaucratic machinery. The OPA became a huge octopus with 50,000 paid employees and almost 300,000 volunteers across the country. This was not just an army. These were your neighbors who were given the power to decide how much butter you could buy for your child. This is what cracked the system. The power that is given to a volunteer assistant is often used as a tool for self-affirmation. The first amusing in their absurdity, situations are connected with this. The famous case of the brown shoes. Leather was rationed for soldiers' boots. The OPA did not prohibit men's shoes in principle, but said only Oxfords in black, brown, or white were allowed. Later, they even had to limit the number of lace holes to save on brass rings. It was a total intrusion into everyday life, but most importantly, the OPA not only controlled what and how much you bought, but also the price. For example, the official established price for coffee was 28 cents per pound. On the black market, it could be 3 or 4 times higher. A quote from Leon Henderson himself, the first OPA administrator. The black market was not created by our office. It was created by demand and greed. Beautifully said, but the OPA created the ideal breeding ground. By setting unrealistically low prices and limiting the quantity, they, in essence, themselves drew the blueprints for the illegal business, where the price was the only real thing, and not this scrap of paper. And now we move on to the most interesting part. Coupons became a currency, not just a piece of paper. They had a price. And where there is a valuable currency, there appear those who want to steal it, counterfeit it, or sell it. Next, we will find out exactly how the mafia, which until then had been focused on bootlegging and gambling, saw a new El Dorado in these colored coupons, which brought them millions, the shadow of scarcity. This is not just a play on words. It was a real black curtain that fell over the American economy. If before the war, prosperity was obvious, now money was hidden up the sleeve, and goods were sold in whispers in the backyard. 200 products. This is the official rationing figure, but in fact, these were 200 starting points from which an invisible but all-powerful market spread. It was invisible to the OPA, but absolutely real for those who wanted to eat a real steak, not a substitute. At the heart of this whole system was a banal math. Demand is much higher than supply. Citizens have money. Wages at factories are good. But they don't have the goods. The seller knows that you will pay not 37 cents for a pound of meat, but $1.37. And this is where corruption appears, not the one we see in the movies, when an official takes a suitcase full of money. Here everything is subtler. Take the example of simple coffee. Coffee was rationed from 42 to 43 due to problems with its delivery across the Atlantic. The allowance, 1 pound per person every 5 weeks. This is a catastrophe for a nation that is hooked on caffeine. What did shopkeepers do? They bought official rationed coffee from wholesalers for 28 cents a pound. They were supposed to sell it to you for the same 28 cents, taking your coupons. But why sell it legally if you can hide 100 pounds of coffee in the warehouse and sell them to special customers for $1.50, without any coupons? You take a risk, but a net profit of 300 to 400% per operation is worth the risk. And most importantly, it was also profitable for the buyer because he received the goods immediately, without queues, and without the humiliation with coupons. Here is a quote that is attributed to many traders of those years, but it perfectly describes the situation. The government is trying to tell me that a pound of sugar, for which I pay 6 cents, I must sell for 8, and my buyer says he will pay me 60. Who should I listen to? The answer is obvious: the one who pays more. The shadow market in the USA was born from below. It was born in the conversation between a butcher and a regular customer. It was born at the gas station when a man approaches you and whispers, "Do you need A coupons for gasoline?" And this market was cruel. There was no consumer protection on it. You paid huge money for a can of stew that might turn out to be spoiled. You bought rubber boots made from poor quality, stolen raw materials. People complained about dirty business, but when you desperately need medicine, or you simply don't have enough meat for your growing son, you don't think about morality. You think about how to get what you need. This market existed on 3 levels, like in the damn Godfather: lower, basic, transfer of coupons between families and neighbors. You don't drink coffee? Give your coupons to me. I'll give you my sugar ration. Middle, traders. Small businesses, like butchers or shopkeepers, who keep double bookkeeping, legal sales for coupons and illegal sales for cash, circumventing everything. Highest, mafia, organized groups. Those who organized smuggling on a national scale. They stole entire trucks of meat or gasoline. This transition from a law-abiding citizen to a participant in an illegal scheme is the most dramatic story of this war. In the next chapter, we will look at exactly how the most insightful and ruthless dealers, our American mafia, became the leaders of this new, prosperous, shadowy world. They went from bootlegging to sugar, and it brought them more than during the Prohibition era. Do you think that the real mafia should have been concentrated on the gambling business or on brothels? You just don't understand what real, unprincipled business is. The dirt that smelled of alcohol suddenly gave way to clean, crisp dollars earned on the sweetest thing: sugar. Prohibition ended in '33. By the early '40s, the American mafia, these godfathers of ours, were looking for somewhere to invest their aggression and their connections. And then World War II appears on the scene, and with it, rationing. The mobsters were not fools. They saw in this new OPA system not obstacles, but an ideal business model. It legitimized demand and guaranteed high prices in the shadows. You no longer had to convince people that you needed to drink prohibited alcohol. You simply gave them what was not on the shelves, and they brought you their money. Sugar became the first big hit. The need for it was crazy. Americans loved it, and soldiers needed it for the alcohol and gunpowder, and also so that people at home could make reserves. Forget about grandma's jams. Suddenly, a sugar coupon on the black market began to cost 5 or even 10 times more than the cost of the sugar itself. And this is where organized crime connects. The mafia did not buy sugar at retail. They worked big time. They penetrated the supply chains, stealing not a bag of sugar, but trucks. Think about port warehouses or trains. There were thousands of tons of sugar lying there, just waiting to be shipped to factories. Security? Easily bribed. Organized gangs robbed entire railway cars of sugar that was intended for legal needs. Their other gold mine, counterfeiting coupons. This is pure business. No blood, just paper and ink. They were masters of this since the time of fake passports and bootlegging stamps. Were printing presses rationed? Yes, but the mafia always had its underground printing houses. The complexity of the OPA system with its thousands of different coupons, colored, with watermarks, with microscopic letters, was their advantage. When the OPA issued a new book, the mafia was already working on copying it. For example, the gang of Abner Longy Zwillman, a major figure in New Jersey, according to some estimates, received up to $30 million a year from black markets alone. $30 million. That's huge, dirty money. And not only him. The Castellammarise clan, the Murder in Kells gang, all of them switched to the distribution of rationed goods. But the Mafia did more than just counterfeit coupons or steal sugar. They provided the network, warehouses, truck drivers who knew how to avoid police patrols, corrupt officials who leaked information about OPA raids. They were the best logisticians of that time. It was a win-win business. You, the citizen, received the goods without red tape. The Mafia, their millions. The state, ridicule. And the most cynical thing, the Mafia, trading stolen fuel and meat, at the same time shouted about patriotism, using the slogans, "Support the Army." Their activities did not end with sugar and coffee. It quickly switched to the most important resource for American life, gasoline. In the next chapter, we will see how the gasoline coupon became a real diamond in the crown of the black market, and why the desire to go on a picnic could cost you 2 or 3 times more than usual. If Americans love something, it's roads and freedom on 4 wheels. A car is not a luxury for us. It's part of our DNA. But when the government cut off that oxygen, the real madness began. Gasoline. It was not just fuel. It was the blood of industry, transport, the ability to be mobile. During the war, almost the entire oil fleet went to serve the needs of the military, supplying tank columns and aircraft. On the East Coast, the shortage was the cruelest, because German submarines at that time hunted our tankers like game. 3 main categories of gasoline coupons were introduced for civilian life, and they were marked with letters. A coupon. The basic, miserable allowance for most. This was enough for a maximum of 2 or 3 gallons a week. In the East, where the shortage was especially severe, this was not even enough to simply drive to work and back home. The government directly said, if you can, ride bicycles. B and C. Coupon. Intended for those whose work was critically important. Mailmen, doctors, military factory workers. T. Coupon. Issued when you needed temporary help, so that you, for example, could get to the farm to harvest the crops. And this is where the gasoline agony began. Every trip you undertook had to be justified. The ban on idle trips is not a metaphor. The OPA issued harsh posters and slogans. To go fishing on Saturday? You are an enemy of the homeland. The A coupon barely allowed you to live. A quote from F.D. Roosevelt. Every gallon of gasoline is either a bomb or fuel for an airplane. This was powerful agitation, but for a simple person who had family in another state, it was just a mockery. And then the black market geniuses took over. Firstly, gasoline brokers appeared. These guys, usually petty mobsters or just brazen crooks, bought up B or C coupons from honest or not-so-honest drivers who had access to them. They could pay a couple of bucks for a gallon bought legally for 20 cents, and then sell it on the black market 2 or 3 times more expensively. But the main scam was in the T coupons and in the corruption at gas stations. Imagine, an OPA clerk could issue a T coupon for 12 gallons for urgent need. And these guys, these corrupt officials, they themselves created fake requests. They themselves wrote out these coupons and then sold them in stacks on the black market. In essence, entire sectors of the OPA, which were supposed to protect us from the black market, themselves fed it. A gasoline coupon. It was real paper gold. It was small, easily hidden, and could be used anywhere. The blackest, most expensive gasoline cost 3 or 4 times the established price, but people paid. Why? Because this coupon gave them opportunity. The opportunity to visit a sick relative. The opportunity to escape from the cursed city for the weekend just to breathe. It bought freedom. This story is not just about gasoline. It's about how the government tries to control your life and how a person finds a loophole. But gasoline was easy money. With meat, everything was more difficult, more dangerous, and smellier. It is to meat that we will move in the next chapter. We will find out how getting a real steak in 1940s America became an art form, and how butchers-in-law fed the American elite, bypassing all OPA rules, and how not to stumble upon rotten meat. If you are an American, you cannot live without a good piece of meat. Meat is not just food. It is our symbol of prosperity and strength. When you are told that you only have coupons for 1.5 kilograms of all meat per week, you feel that you have been cut to the quick. Meat became the sharpest shortage after gasoline, and the most scandalous. Meat spoils quickly. It was impossible to just hide it in a barn for a month like sugar or coffee. This means that the black market meat business required speed, connections, and complete unscrupulousness. How did this meat conveyor work? The scheme was as follows. The beginning, slaughterhouses. An official slaughterhouse was obligated to sell a certain percentage of its meat to the government for the army at fixed prices. Everything that remained went to the civilian market and was rationed with coupons. The black market did not use this path. Instead, they made deals with small illegal slaughterhouses, the so-called evading slaughterers. These places worked under the cover of night, did not report to the OPA at all, and sold meat only on the black market. They avoided all inspections and quality control. Transportation, cash without documents. Transporting meat was always an adventure. Trucks coming from legal slaughterhouses were entitled to an increased supply of gasoline. Drivers easily forged documents and carried more than they could, and sold this surplus on the black market. The cargo went without documents, so it could not be tracked. Sales, your butchers, and this is the most interesting part. Sellers, your ordinary butchers, became those very butchers-in-law who, smiling, told you, "Sorry, today only chicken, the coupons for beef ran out," and through the back door sold a magnificent ribeye to your neighbor at 5 times the price. They had 2 displays, one legal, almost empty, for OPA control, the second, for friends, which sold goods only for cash and without coupons. Here is a quote I heard. During the war, a good butcher earned more than a Wall Street broker in New York. And it was true. Profit from the illegal sale of meat reached 300 to 400%. The biggest problem with this business? You risked your health. Since the evading slaughterers avoided veterinary and sanitary inspections, the quality of the meat was monstrous. There were cases when people bought meat that turned out to be infected, or even simply rotten, masked with spices. You paid gold for a pig in a poke, and no one will give you a check and a guarantee. It's the black market. But you know what's most cynical? The black market served not only bandits and greedy shopkeepers, it served the elite, the cream of society. If you were an official, an actor, or you had a restaurant for friends, you always knew who to call. Restaurants in New York and Chicago, which were forced to display their menus on the doors, adhering to rationing, fed the wealthy luxurious portions in the back room for cash, without taking coupons. In the end, in Washington, D.C., the capital of the country, black markets worked most openly. This is where those who wrote the laws lived, and they were the ones circumventing them. And if meat was a shortage that was needed for survival, the next product was needed just for movement. It was strategically important and so valuable that people were ready to kill for it. We are not talking about oil or gold, but about a black, smelly, but absolutely necessary material. In the next chapter, we will figure out why you could be shot for a car tire in wartime, and why the U.S. suddenly returned to bicycles and horse-drawn carriages, rubber. This product does not seem strategically important to you in peacetime, does it? But when the Japanese captured Singapore and other regions of Southeast Asia at the end of 41, 90% of the world's reserves of natural rubber were out of our reach. Japan, in one fell swoop, deprived the most motorized country in the world of the main raw material. Everything from tires to hoses, from shoe soles to wire insulation, required rubber. The American government quickly realized, without tires, military trucks will not be able to transport supplies, and it introduced, damn it, a total ban on the sale of new tires, except for Army needs. If you needed a new tire for a civilian car, you had to prove that you deserved it, that your job was critically important, and your life would stop without a tire. And even so, getting a tire was a real battle with the OPA bureaucracy. The dirtiest black market games are associated with this. A person who had only 4 tires on his car actually had a whole fortune that had to be hidden. If you had 5 tires, the 5th was considered smuggling. People began to steal tires directly from cars on the streets. Criminals worked not at night, but in broad daylight. Raiders knew they don't need to rob banks. It is enough to steal a couple of new tires, and you can safely receive cash that will last for a year. A case that became widely known in the press of those years. In one of the districts of New York, more than 1,000 tire thefts were registered in 3 months. Can you imagine? It's a real rubber phantom that haunted drivers. And again, the mafia, which is working at full capacity. They did not only steal, they were engaged in recapping. Recapping is the restoration of the tread on an old tire. By law, this was supposed to be done using strictly rationed, low-quality synthetic rubber Buna S. But on the black market, dealers used stolen, higher-quality rubber, or simply resold already restored tires at a crazy price. Prices? A new tire cost 5, 6 times the official price on the black market. But the most terrible thing was that people had no choice. If your tire broke, your car became a useless piece of metal in the garage. And you, damn it, paid as much as they asked, just to start moving again. And the government fought this with ridiculous methods. Roosevelt, to overcome the shortage, launched a program for collecting waste rubber. You, Americans, had to give your old, torn rubber for recycling. This, of course, was a symbol of patriotism, but it was clearly not enough to solve the problem on a national scale. In order to somehow avoid dependence on rubber, some farmers and townsfolk returned to horse-drawn carriages, and millions of Americans began riding bicycles. This looks like a caricature of the most progressive nation, but it was the harsh reality. The country that built an empire on the auto industry suddenly became like a pre-industrial era. The tire story shows how helpless the state system was in the face of the reality of scarcity. The government could prohibit, but it could not replace. And when it came to tires or gasoline, control over paper coupons became no less important than control over the supply itself. In the next chapter, we will look at how the printing mafia took its game to a new level. How they turned the counterfeiting of government documents into a mass art, and how much they earned by simply printing the state currency they called coupons. This will be a story about brilliant counterfeiters and the stupidity of the OPA. Paper money is an illusion that works as long as we all believe in it. And when your government begins to print not only dollars, but also hundreds of types of coupon currencies, you create a perfect target for those who do not respect the laws of printing. Coupons were not just pieces of paper. They were, in essence, an additional currency, strictly tied to real goods. A Category A gasoline coupon cost on the black market an average of 50 to 60 cents. That is, by printing it, you received instant profit. This was better than printing counterfeit dollars because the punishment was milder, and the fake commodity provided here and now. The OPA tried. They printed coupons on special paper, with watermarks, with microscopic font, even with perforation, so that they could not be peeled off and reattached. But you know yourself, any lock was invented to be picked. The mafia was ahead of the curve. These were no longer bootleggers, they were financiers and printing geniuses. Their counterfeiting operation worked like a well-oiled machine. Buying equipment, they did not steal. They bought it through shell companies, printing presses, ink, special press molds. All this could be obtained if you were ready to pay. Espionage. With the help of bribes or blackmail, they obtained samples. They needed genuine coupons to study the font, watermarks, and perforation. Production. The work was carried out in underground printing houses, often in remote places, so as not to attract attention, and they produced not single samples, but millions. The loudest case was the operation to counterfeit gasoline coupons organized in Chicago. The police discovered an entire printing house that was producing fake coupons on a scale capable of supplying gasoline to an entire city. Millions of fake coupons were seized. This underground business brought its owners literally thousands of dollars a day. Here is one interesting fact. Due to the lack of ink and paper for printing legal coupons, the OPA constantly changed their design and color. This confusion played into the hands of counterfeiters. Citizens were confused, and it was difficult for sellers to distinguish a genuine coupon from a fake one. And here is another important point. Distribution. Counterfeiting was useless if it could not be cashed. The mafia created a huge network. They sold coupons not directly, but through an entire hierarchy of couriers and brokers. These brokers sold coupons, say, to gas station owners, who, knowing that it was a fake, accepted them and wrote them off, and then simply burned the copies, reporting to the OPA that the coupons had been used. As a result, the budget suffered, and the mafia received cash. A quote from that time. When the government creates scarcity, it issues a carte blanche to fraudsters. We can argue about patriotism and morality. But when you see that one piece of paper costs you 50 cents, and you can easily print it, what choice will you make? This printing operation showed that the black markets in the USA were not a chaotic phenomenon. It was a highly organized, capitalist structure that used the imperfection of the system. But not only bandits participated in this dark market. The most interesting and most massive conflict took place in the heads of ordinary people. It was not only an economic, but also a moral choice. In the next chapter, we will figure out, who did the citizens who circumvented the law consider themselves to be? Honest Americans who just want to live, or rats that gnaw their nation from within? And how the OPA tried to play on their patriotism to suppress the black market. When a nation is under arms, you are always told what you should do. You must sacrifice. You must believe. You must follow the rules. But what happens when these rules make your life unbearable, and your neighbor prospers just by winking at the butcher? The war became a huge, nationwide test of morality for America. On one side, heroes who give their lives on the front. On the other, the home front, where ordinary people had to decide daily, be honest and starve, or break the law and eat normally. A family receives coffee coupons and does not drink it. By law, these coupons must burn up. But by logic, they are worth money, and they can be exchanged with a neighbor for his sugar coupons. This does not seem like a crime. It seems like smart housekeeping. This is the so-called gray market, which was softer than the black one, but was no less illegal. The problem was that the government was running a very tough propaganda campaign. OPA posters painted the black marketeer as the most vile type. He was depicted next to Hitler and Mussolini. One of the most famous slogans sounded, "When you buy from the black market, you are buying death." You were directly told that every steak bought illegally is a cartridge that did not go to a soldier. It is a tank that did not move. And this really divided America. First, patriot lawyers. Those who, on principle, stood in lines, did not break the rules, ate rationed food, and considered those who circumvented the system to be traitors. These people often reported their neighbors to the OPA. Second, practical survivalists, the majority. They tried to be honest, but if there was an opportunity to buy, for example, more sugar without too much fuss and risk, they used it. I support the war, But my family should not starve. That was their motto. Third, black dealers, the mafia and organized crime, who did not give a damn about patriotism. They were just making money. Passions boiled over in the newspapers of that time. Editors called for tough measures, spoke of rust on the American soul. And it was true. When people saw officials and the wealthy eating steaks in expensive restaurants that were not on the shelves, faith in the honesty of the system collapsed. They felt that they, simple workers, were being told to tighten their belts while someone else was getting fat. This created a total apathy towards the laws. People reasoned, I work at a military factory 12 hours a day. I benefit the nation, and the OPA doesn't let me buy a new pair of shoes because they are needed by soldiers. But if I buy these shoes on the black market, it's my honestly earned money. Why am I a rat? It was a psychological revolt against the state. The more the OPA tightened the screws, the more the conviction grew that the law only worked for the poor and honest. And the most terrible thing, it undermined faith in legality. And the OPA, meanwhile, tried hard to restore order. They did not just print posters, they sent thousands of their agents into the streets. And these agents were hated more than tax collectors. In the next chapter, we will see how the OPA fought the black market, millions of cases, constant raids, and how this hatred poured out into real aggression. We will also find out how these 7 million cases actually only strengthened the power of the black market. The OPA, Office of Price Control. When I hear this name, I see not a cohesive team of defenders, but a bunch of exhausted, often unprofessional people who were given an impossible mission. Their task was to stop an avalanche of human greed with a ruler and a pile of papers. The OPA was created with one noble goal, to curb inflation so that workers would not demand higher wages. But it quickly turned into the National Price and Ration Police. How did they work? They had a giant army, consisting of 50,000 paid employees and almost 300,000 volunteers. These volunteers were ordinary housewives, pensioners, who believed they were protecting America from speculators. They stood in stores, checked whether the prices on the price tags corresponded to those listed in the OPA list, and reported violations. It was a kind of civil price guard, and these controllers caused total, sincere hatred. People who already felt oppressed by the shortage hated it when their neighbor, Mrs. Smith, came and checked their receipts. Store owners, butchers, and gas attendants treated the OPA as the worst enemies. The results of their activities, it would seem, are impressive. During the war, the OPA considered about 7 million violation cases. 7 million, damn it. This is a gigantic number, which nevertheless could not stop the black market, but only pushed it to become even more inventive and underground. They printed the legendary posters, "Stamp out black markets." They depicted a boot crushing a snake. The propaganda was tough, but in everyday life, it did not work. Why? Because for most Americans, the butcher was not the snake. The snake was the government, which set inadequate prices, forcing people to play this dirty game. If the butcher does not have a legal steak, and it is available on the black market, who is the real enemy here? The OPA had the right to fine, and in serious cases, even revoke sales licenses. But this strength was often their weakness. A fine? The mobster paid it and considered it a profit tax. Close a gas station? The owner went into the shadows, worked exclusively for cash and without coupons, and earned twice as much. There is a quote from the newspapers of those years. "We have more OPA agents than police in Chicago, but less honest meat than in the Texas meadows." The funniest thing in this tragedy is the inefficiency of the bureaucracy. Coupons had a limited validity period. An OPA agent had to come, check, draw up a report, send the case. By the time it reached the court, the meat in question had long been eaten, and the fake coupons burned. The OPA tried to control price and quantity, but in the end, it controlled neither. It simply drove all this business into the shadows. But, as I said, this giant office was not monolithic. It was full of ordinary people who also wanted to live well. In the next chapter, we will see how the very control system was corrupted from within. How police officers and officials' wives sold the very coupons they were supposed to guard, and why the black market flourished most strongly precisely in Washington, D.C., the capital. Because the laws, as usual, were broken by those who created them. The OPA was created to be the guardian of justice. But like any system, it consisted of people. And if you give power over scarcity to an ordinary person, their moral principles undergo a severe test. Many did not withstand it. Under the cover of night, corruption in the OPA system and police wives selling coupon books. The hatred for the OPA did not arise from scratch. There were cases when an OPA agent used his position to buy himself the best piece of meat in the store, bypassing the queues. And if you are a volunteer, you have access to your neighbor's data about how much sugar and gasoline they were issued. And this information had a price. Corruption flourished at all levels. Subtle corruption. This is when an inspector comes to a shop. The butcher tells him, "I know you found a violation, mister. But here, take this new, rationed razor for your son, and I will just accidentally forget about this violation." These small bribes in the form of scarce goods were widespread. Selling information. Couriers and officials who had access to information about OPA raid dates sold this information to the mafia. Gas station attendants, who knew when an inspection would be paid to have time to cover their tracks of their black sales. The fattest corruption, selling coupons. It was the coupons that were the most valuable asset, and it was in them that the mafia found a loophole. How to get tons of genuine state coupons without counterfeiting. Steal them from the state. The most famous and cynical example is connected with the families of officials. Coupons were not delivered by mail. They were distributed through administrative centers, schools, sometimes even through police stations. In some states, the storage and distribution were handled by the wives of police officers and municipal employees. And here, the fairy tale begins. A policeman's wife is given an entire room filled with coupon books for gasoline, sugar, and meat. She must distribute them. Now think, if you take a dozen books from this room, who will know about it? A loud scandal in Cleveland showed that entire books of gasoline coupons, intended for the Army or critically important civilian needs, disappeared. Where did they go? To the black market, of course. They were sold wholesale, bringing their owners, often the wives of people in uniform, thousands of dollars in clean, untraceable profit. A quote from those times. Every third OPA employee had a side job after work, working for themselves on the black market. It was not always direct trading, but it was a constant conflict of interest. You cannot honestly control what you yourself desperately want to buy. This was what broke the moral backbone of the nation. If you, a simple person, see that those who should comply with the law are selling it, then what is the point for you to comply with it? The OPA became a symbol of not only inefficient regulation, but also hypocrisy. The black market in Washington, D.C. flourished most strongly precisely for this reason. This is where those who wrote the rationing laws lived. Steaks, elite alcohol, the best cigarettes, rationed leather shoes, everything was available in closed circles for friends. An ordinary citizen in Washington could see an official who boasted of a new tie, which, damn it, could not have been made without rationed silk. We will consider this illegal menu for the selected ones in the next chapter. We will see how rich Americans not only did not tighten their belts, but also lived large, not using coupons and spitting on all government propaganda. How exactly the U.S. high society supported and financed the most exquisite part of the shadow market. Do you remember how they told you, "We are all together in this war, we are all in the same boat"? That's nonsense. In American capitalism, there never was and never will be one boat. Someone will always have a private yacht, and World War II proved this with brutal frankness. For a simple worker, the black market was a way to survive or simply get normal food. For the elite, it was a way to confirm their status. They did not need a rationed, tasteless steak. They needed caviar, French champagne, and imported silk. When the war came, the high society of Washington, New York, and Hollywood did not switch to ration coupons. They switched to private access. And their black market worked like an exclusive club, where cash was just a ticket and connections were a pass. Take high-end restaurants. By law, they had to collect coupons for meat, butter, cheese, and coffee. But in places like New York's 21 Club or Delmonico's, you were certainly served a rationed menu in the main hall. But for the chosen ones in private rooms, portions were served that even American soldiers had not seen. And all this, without coupons, only for cash, and through the back door. The owners of these restaurants were in collusion directly with large wholesalers and the mafia. They did not steal a pound of meat. They bought entire carcasses that were stolen at slaughterhouses and transported bypassing all inspections. For them, this was a business that was worth the risk. The second striking example: clothing and nylon. Nylon was a strategically important material for parachutes. Civilian production of nylon stockings was stopped. For women, especially in Hollywood, nylon stockings were a status symbol. Soon they appeared on the black market at a price 3 to 4 times higher than pre-war. Rich ladies could afford this little thing, which demonstrated their difference from the rest. In wartime, demonstrating surplus, that was also a kind of elite rebellion. A quote from a temporary OPA administrator's report: "The greatest number of rationing violations were recorded not in poor areas, but in expensive restaurants and country clubs. The thirst for excess in the rich seems to be stronger than the thirst for survival in the poor." For example, alcohol. Whiskey was rationed because grain went to military needs, but elite alcohol appeared on the black market for the elite, which was not subject to rationing. Expensive imported wines, liqueurs. The supply went through mafia channels, who could always arrange with the dock workers to accidentally unload a box or two of something special. The irony and cynicism reached their peak here. People at the front were fighting for democracy and equality, and at home, the wealthy created their own private shadow world where equality did not exist at all. Their black market was not about survival. It was about consumption, conspicuous consumption, when the whole country was experiencing scarcity. This elite black market not only demoralized ordinary citizens, it gave enormous wealth to criminal structures. The mafia understood that serving a few hundred wealthy clients, ready to pay a tenfold price for a kilogram of coffee, was much more profitable than dealing with thousands of coupons. And while we are talking about scarcity at home, do not forget about what was happening on the other side of the world. Soldiers and sailors who were at the front also did not sit idle, and brought with them the most unexpected souvenirs, which became the most universal currency on the black market. In the next chapter, we will look at how frontline souvenirs, mainly cigarettes, became more expensive than gold, and how our guys fighting overseas themselves became participants in the international black market. When a man finds himself in conditions of complete chaos, he quickly establishes his own rules. Forget about dollars and cents. Forget about OPA coupons. The real, only recognized world currency of World War II, in the trenches and on ships, was one: cigarettes. Cigarettes were part of the soldier's ration. It was an encouragement, a way to relieve stress, and most importantly, it was the most liquid asset that could be obtained in conditions of scarcity at the front. Take any American brand, Camel or Lucky Strike. In Europe or Asia, they cost more than gold coins. Cigarettes became a universal currency for several reasons. Standardization. American cigarettes were known throughout the world, and their quality was guaranteed. Scarcity. In Europe and Asia after the war, local tobacco production was almost non-existent, and smoking did not stop. Portability, easy to hide, easy to exchange, and their value was widely known. American soldiers and sailors, especially those who served abroad, quickly grasped this scheme. They received cigarettes for free or at very low prices. Then they exchanged them for everything they needed from the local population: food, alcohol, souvenirs, or in the dirtiest cases, services. A carton of Camel could buy more than a monthly lieutenant's salary. Here is a quote attributed to veterans. In Italy, for 20 packs of cigarettes, you could rent a house for a month. Not money, not gold, but 20 packs, bought for pennies. It was a huge international black market. The problem was that when soldiers returned home, this habit of trading scarce goods did not disappear. What did they bring? Trophies and scarcity, real military goods, gasoline, medical alcohol, ammunition, which were later converted into fireworks, which soldiers stole from warehouses. Foreign souvenirs, the very trophies that could be exchanged in the States for our scarce goods. The most striking example is related to army supplies. The sale of stolen gasoline or cigarettes from army warehouses flourished right on military bases. If a soldier knew how to bribe a truck driver, he could take out entire boxes of cigarettes. Then these cigarettes were sold on the American black market with a colossal markup, because in the USA tobacco, although not in total deficit, was rationed. This black market was dirty, but it allowed the soldiers to feel not like victims of war, but predators. They learned to circumvent the system. They learned to make money on chaos. This practice, trading everything that can be exchanged, did not disappear with the end of the war. It firmly entered the consciousness of 1 million men who returned home. They no longer trusted the system. They did not trust coupons. They knew that to get what you want, you do not need to stand in line, but to find a loophole. In the next and final chapter, we will draw the line. We will see how the black market affected post-war America, how this dirty money became part of legal business, how the mafia grew on stolen coupons, and why our nation, having experienced this shadow, forever remembered that circumventing the system is sometimes the fastest way to success. The war ended. Heroes returned. All at once, Roosevelt canceled rationing on most goods. But you know what remained? Unfinished laws, hatred of bureaucracy, and a new generation of dealers who learned to profit from chaos. Firstly, the OPA, this cumbersome, hated body, was dissolved. But its legacy, total faith in circumventing the system, remained. Americans who for 4 years stood in lines and fought for the right to buy a piece of meat forever remembered that the law can and should be bypassed if it interferes with your life. The mafia, which made millions on sugar, gasoline, and fake coupons, now had a huge, untaxed capital. This black money was not kept in the basement. It was laundered and invested in legal business, construction, casinos, legal establishments. The godfathers who were engaged in bootlegging became builders, hoteliers, owners of transport companies. These companies, in turn, became new tools for organizing the black market already in peacetime. They had a logistics network, established supply channels, and connections with corrupt officials. The black market did not die. It simply transformed into a more sophisticated, less obvious system of corruption and shadow economy. America developed a culture of illegality. Entrepreneurs who honestly tried to live by the OPA rules often lost to those who paid bribes or used stolen coupons. As a result, many small businesses realized, to survive, you need to be a little black. This idea became part of the American business ethic after the war. Think about the young generation that grew up watching their fathers sell extra gasoline coupons to neighbors. They learned, first, to trust only themselves, not to trust the state and its rules. Second, to value the commodity, not the paper. The real value is the commodity itself, and not its price on the label, which is written by an official. Third, inventiveness defeats the law. Take the same soldiers who returned from the front. They were masters at getting the impossible, from exchanging cigarettes for whiskey to stealing equipment from warehouses. They brought this smarts into civilian life. These were people who did not know what no meant if a loophole could be found. Rationing ended, but the inflation that the OPA was supposed to protect us from sharply jumped in 46. Meat prices, which were held back by the OPA, soared by 50 to 70% immediately. The black market, in essence, only masked this inflation, which hit with double force as soon as it disappeared. Thus, the black market did not just provide people with a piece of meat, it became a school for millions of Americans. A school that taught the state is the enemy, scarcity is an opportunity, and if you did not profit from this chaos, you simply were not smart enough. We are done. We have seen America not only heroic, but also greedy, not only strong, but also corrupt. It's time to draw the line. We spent over 60 minutes figuring it out. You thought war was about guns and honor, but it turned out to be about sugar and dirty gasoline. It was a war for a piece of meat that took place right in the kitchens of American homes, and it was won not by Roosevelt, but by the cleverest butcher in the neighborhood. That's all. World War II not only changed the map of the world, it changed the moral map of America. The OPA rationing system, which was supposed to be a symbol of equality, became the catalyst for the largest wave of corruption and organized crime the country has ever known. You understood what your father and grandfather really thought about patriotic duty when they saw officials' wives selling stolen gasoline coupons. The legacy of the shadow is not in history. It is in us. We still regard the rules with suspicion. We still look for loopholes, because our nation learned. When the system tries to control you, your task is to be smarter than the system. Scarcity is just a breather between opportunities. Don't let anyone sell you a sweet lie. Real wealth is often built not on checks, but on whispers in the backyard. Look at the world around you. Those who shout the loudest about the law today are often the first to circumvent it. I hope this story made you scratch your head a little. If you watched until the end, tell me, would you stand in line with coupons, or would you risk buying that steak bypassing the OPA? Write in the comments, I'm interested in the truth. And in the meantime, subscribe, because if you know how the system was arranged then, it will be easier for you to understand how it is deceiving you now. Look for the shadow. That's where the real money lies. See you, friends.